Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. It's a completely unscripted episode because I don't really need to do any research on what I'm going to talk about. But I think it's really important to talk about it only because it could happen to anybody, and it happened to me. So I record my episodes a few weeks in advance. The reason there's only been a 4-week gap instead of a 6-week gap is because I was 2 weeks ahead on my episodes. Unfortunately, something happened that put a halt to just about everything. And it's been 6 weeks since I've been able to actually sit at a computer for an extended period of time and be able to do any work or record anything. So everything has gone to shit. There is no other way of putting it. But this week's episode, 142, is my farm accident. And I want to talk about it because I think it's important to realise that farm accidents can happen and do happen. Mine, on the greater scheme of things, and I keep saying it, the whole time I was in hospital, I kept saying it, and one of the nurses kept pointing out to me that I was very cheery and very upbeat and looking at the positive sides of things. And then I did say to her that I was barely holding it together, and the reason I was being so upbeat was because I kept thinking it could have been so much fucking worse than it was. There's no nice way of putting that. I could have been killed. And it's hard to kind of adjust to your own mortality and try and stay upbeat. But if I didn't laugh about it a little bit and do the whole, well, it could have been worse, I would have just been in tears the whole time. So I'm going to start from the beginning, I'll tell you exactly what happened and where we're at now. And apologise, obviously, for having 4 weeks off the podcast. So for those of my loyal supporters who are still there, thank you so much. 4 weeks off, you'd probably be going, what the hell is she doing? Like, what happened to normal programming? And I did put out a TikTok and a reel on social media when I first came out of hospital, just explaining that things were coming to a grinding halt for a couple of weeks because I really had to focus on getting myself better, and that meant putting other things aside, even the things that are really dear to me, and the podcast is one of those things. So on the 1st of November, just before the 1st of November, I received a message from a neighbour who I actually am not good friends with. I don't know the lady very well, but I understand her background story through our social media circles. She lives 20 minutes from my farm, and she had been through her own health complications, and she had had a calf born. So a heifer had calved, and it was a Galloway, some people say it, Galloway cow. And she had calved this beautiful calf. It was her second calf, but there was an issue with her teats. So her teats were too big, essentially, for the calf to get a really good latch on. For those that don't know, Galways are a dual-purpose breed, so you actually can milk a Galway. They're a meat breed. They're a very big cow, big as in solid and stocky, not big as in tall. They're not like a Frisian where they're very tall, but they're very stocky. And this cow's teats were too big for the calf to get a proper latch on. He was getting a latch on 1 or 2 of her teats, but he couldn't get a latch on all of them. This lady had never milked a cow before. She asked if anybody could milk a cow. I put my hand up, so did another lady. The other lady came round. She managed to get her in, strip some milk off her. She was then going away for the weekend. So on Saturday, the 1st of November, the lady asked me if I could pop up there and help her get the cow in and strip some milk off so that the calf could then get a latch on. And we were hoping that after a couple of days, the udder would reduce a little bit. The calf would understand how much he needed to open his mouth to get a good latch on the teat, and therefore it wouldn't be a problem after that. So I drove up there. I drove up literally in my farm clothes with nothing in the car with me but my phone, because I only intended to be there for 10 minutes. It wasn't going to be a long job. I had, that afternoon, we had rugby league presentations for my daughter's rugby league team, and I was supposed to be giving out awards to the girls who had won particular awards for that for the season, which I was very excited and looking forward to. My stepson was out here. My two kids, my son was actually on a sleepover. Till was here, obviously. TJ, my daughter, she was here, and so everybody was at home. I ducked up the road 9:30 just to quickly milk out this cow, and then I would be back and we'd get ready for all the rugby presentation stuff in the afternoon at 2:00. I got there. The cow did not want to go into the race, and we tried a few things. We tried, making noise. We tried giving her a tap on the butt. I pulled on her tail, which is a common practice to pull on their tail to try and move them into the race. I had let go of her tail, and I had turned to say to my neighbour, would she be food orientated? Would we be able to shake a bucket of food in front of her and get her to walk into the race so that I could reach through the bars of the race and milk her? And as I turned to say this, and I think I got out, is she food orientated? And that was as far as I got. The cow, I was still in the yard with the cow. The owner was on the other side of the fence, and I had my back to her, and she kicked me with both feet, landing in the back of my left thigh. Now, for those that have been on the program for a while, you would know that I have had a partial knee reconstruction in my left leg. And when she kicked the left thigh, I felt instant pain and fell to the ground. Literally, I flew through the air. I wasn't leaning up against the fence, but I was standing facing the fence, and I hit the fence. I moved that far and landed up against the fence with my leg in a position that was not normal. And as soon as I looked at my leg, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get back up again. It was either dislocated, which was the best outcome it could have been. I was hoping it was dislocated, or it was fractured. And I didn't know which. I just knew that I was in a lot of pain and that my leg was pointing a different direction to where it should have been pointing. The neighbour was unsure of what to do, to be honest. She didn't panic, but she came close to panicking. And I had to give her instructions to get the cow out of the yard for me. She kept asking me whether I was able to get back up again, and I told her that I was not going to be able to get back up again. I could see by looking at my leg that any kind of movement was going to make the damage worse. So I asked her to call an ambulance straight away. Our closest centre was Yass, which is in New South Wales. It's outside of Canberra. And so the ambulance would have been coming from there. I then asked her to go down and open both of her gates. And these are things that I think everybody that lives on a farm needs to have a plan for what to do in the event that you have to call an ambulance. I've been through it with my kids. They know that if I'm ever found in the paddock in an unconscious state, if myself or the handy helper are ever non-responsive, they know to call an ambulance straight away, and then for one of them to go down and man the gates until emergency services can get there. And the only reason for doing this is, well, there's two reasons. One is it gets emergency services in the gate much quicker without them having to worry about are there animals that are going to bite us, that kind of thing. It also means that they see a kid standing at a gate, holding a gate, getting ready to open it. They're more likely to think, we are at the right address, we're going in the right location. Now, one of the other things you need to consider on those kind of fronts is if you have any livestock guardian dogs. We do have a livestock guardian dog who her shift is night shift. So she spends night shift in the chicken paddock and she spends day shift in the house block because that's her downtime. She needs to have downtime. We don't have a fox problem during the day, so she's only in the paddock of a night. But if a emergency services vehicle was coming through the gate, one of the kids would need to get the livestock guardian dog and take her back up to the chicken paddock because she is not good with strangers. So you don't want emergency services to have any more obstacles than necessary to get to you in an emergency. So these are things that if you're living in a rural block, you probably need to have a chat with the kids, make sure that they know what would be required of them, because when it happens, you don't want to have to be describing to them. You want to be able to say to them, remember what we planned? You need to go and open the gate. You need to put the dog away. You need to make sure that the people coming up in the emergency services car, like an ambulance, are going to be able to get to me. That's the most important thing. So this lady, my neighbour, she went and opened up her gates. I asked her to go out to my car and get my phone so that I could ring the handy helper. And of course, as the handy helper said, any phone call that starts with "don't panic," immediately it's like trying to baptize a cat. You say "don't panic" to somebody on a phone call, their immediate reaction is to panic. But I did try by saying, I'm okay, an ambulance is on its way. That, of course, set him off even worse, because then he was like, oh my God, you wouldn't have called an ambulance unless you absolutely had to. So I explained to him that I was looking at my leg, it was pointing the wrong direction. I was not confident that I would be coming home from hospital tonight. I was also fairly confident that the ambulance would likely have to take me to the biggest hospital in Canberra. So I was giving him those instructions. Plus I was giving him instructions on how to look after the animals in my absence, how to manage the rugby league presentations, what to say to my children so that they didn't panic. It was a bit of a nightmare. But it actually, I think, having to remember and organise everybody in that way actually helped keep me calm during that process of laying there. So the neighbour had removed the cow out of the round yard that I was in, and the calf had gone back to the mum so that they wouldn't get upset and cause any kind of more further damage. And I gave all my instructions to the handy helper while I was laying on the ground. I then went through the process of trying to assess myself how bad the damage was. So I ran my hand down my leg. I could feel that it was, I forget the word for it, but where the leg, the bottom part of the leg and the top part of the leg do not line up, and you know that there is some kind of distortion is probably the best word for it. There's a distortion in the leg. And now I didn't know at that point whether it was dislocated or whether it was fractured, but I was trying to feel to see whether I could tell what it was, and I couldn't. The pain was just too intense, so I couldn't pick between the two. What I did discover in feeling down my leg, because I had work pants on, so I had long pants on, what I did discover is that my knee was bleeding. Now, that could have been two things. It could have been that the cow's hoof had grazed my skin, although she'd kicked me at the back of the thigh, which in hindsight, I didn't think about that at the time. I just kept thinking, oh, maybe her hoof scratched my skin. Then I thought, because my other leg was hurting as well, I thought maybe I've hit the fence so hard that I've taken some skin off my knee under the surface of my pants, but I couldn't feel an abrasion in my pants. So that kind of made me a little bit worried. Or obviously the last one, which is what it turned out to be, it could have been an open fracture. And an open fracture is where the bone has come out through the skin and pierced the skin. And in my case, it came out and went back in, which is probably the best thing that could happen, because I think if I'd felt bone sticking out of my leg, I probably would have lost it instead of keeping it together the way that I did. So I was laying there. I'd given all the instructions to the handy helper, told him where my car was, told him that I needed an overnight bag for the hospital with a change of underwear and a change of clothes because I just had my farm clothes on. I asked him to bring in my phone charger and a toothbrush and a hairbrush and all those things that you would, if you were going to hospital on a planned trip, you would know to pack. He then realised that, of course, I was laying in a round yard talking to him on speakerphone with my leg in the condition it was, and then he started to panic because he was like, you're too calm, you're going to fall over, you're going to panic in a second, you're not going to be able to keep it together until the ambulance get there. And I was fine. While I was on the phone to him, I was actually really fine. Luckily, when I did hang up the phone from him, the neighbour had come back up from the front driveway where she'd gone and opened both of her gates. She'd locked her dogs away. She'd come back, she'd opened the pins on the side of the round yard so that she could, when the ambulance got there, she could move the fence paling that I was resting up against so that they could get a stretcher into me so that I wouldn't have to be moved in a weird kind of way, like I wouldn't have to be shunted out some other direction. So I was able to talk to her then and try and, keep myself calm in that respect. In hindsight, it was about half an hour from the time she called until the time the ambulance arrived. It felt like an hour. It felt like 2 hours. It felt like the longest time possible because the pain was so intense. Anyway, the ambulance got there. It was a male and female ambo. The male officer was a 20-year veteran, very experienced in farm emergencies and farm accidents. So he's probably seen a hell of a lot worse than what he saw with me. And I still keep saying I am just so grateful that it was not worse than what it was. He took one look at me and said, I need to cut your trousers so that I can have a look at your leg. And I was like, I don't give a fuck about my trousers. You cut whatever you need. Like, you cut them off completely. I don't give a shit. Like, if I'm laying here naked, I don't care so long as you can fix me. And he cut it. And I said, now that you've had a look, please tell me it's dislocated. And he wouldn't respond and just said, look, I think we need to get the green whistle to you, which I'd never had the green whistle before. He said, we need to get the green whistle into you. I don't have x-ray vision, was his response. Which didn't fill me with hope because I thought if it was dislocated, he would likely just say, yeah, it looks dislocated. So they gave me the green whistle, which I'd never had before. For anybody that's never had it, it's a really strong, I actually don't know what drug is in it, but it smells and tastes like acetone, like nail polish. And it made me lightheaded. I don't think it did a lot to get rid of the pain, but as the ambo said to me, he said, when you're in the kind of pain that I was in, once we worked out what the problem was, when you're in that kind of pain, there's very little that's going to remove all the pain. He said all we wanted you to do was be relaxed enough for us to be able to do what we had to do, get a line in, get you onto a backboard, get you onto a stretcher. That's all they needed. And the green whistle allows you to be able to do that. It allows them to get you more relaxed. So they had to put a splint on my leg. They had to get me on a backboard because they didn't know whether there was any back damage. You know, nobody wants to move you just in case. Then they got me onto a stretcher. By this point, the pain was ramped right up. I was like, the movement was enough to really ramp up the pain. And I said to him, I've never experienced pain like this. And please, you need to give me something. I'm really in like a world of hurt. And he had a line in by then in my arm, and he gave me fentanyl, which is a drug that as a law enforcement officer, I have had a little bit of experience because they teach us about it so that we don't get exposed to it, because it's a very strong drug and it can be fatal. I think Prince and Michael Jackson both may have used fentanyl and may have contributed to their deaths. So fentanyl is a drug that when you hear it, you go, shit, that's like heavy duty stuff. I don't want that. But honestly, at that point, he said fentanyl, I wouldn't have cared. He could have said he was putting horse poo into my veins, and I would have said, if it's going to take the pain away, I don't really care. Anyway, he put fentanyl in. I've got to be honest, it made me very lightheaded, but it didn't take the pain away. He then gave me some morphine on top of that, and that took the edge off. And when I say it took the edge off, the pain was still there, but wow, I was not sucking in the air and thinking, how much longer do I have to last like this? Now, it was about a 45-minute trip from where we were into the hospital in the ambulance, and he was kind enough once he got me onto the stretcher. And I should add, he cut the pants and then he looked at my boots, and they were my good work boots, and I yelled and went, don't you dare cut those boots. Take them off. I don't care how much it hurts. Just take them off. So he got the boots off. They got me onto the stretcher. I had the line in so that they could give me more pain relief as needed. They had my leg splintered so that it wouldn't roll around too much in the ambulance ride and getting in and out of the ambulance. Got me onto a stretcher, got me into the ambulance. My lovely neighbour, who was trying to still hold it together very well at that point, I said to her, my partner's going to come up. He's going to pick up the car. You know, I've got my phone. There's nothing else in the car I need. The keys were still in the car because we live in the country. We don't take the keys out when we, are parked at a safe place. Anyway, so we had the 45-minute ride in. The ambo was lovely. Every time we braked, because I was head towards the cab of the ambulance, every time we braked, my leg shifted and hurt more. The pain ramped up again. And so he got to a point where every time we had to go around a major roundabout or come up to a major intersection, he would just pop a little bit more morphine in. And that was just taking the edge off enough so that I was able to keep it together and kind of go, no, I'm good. I could just focus on getting in there. During that ride in, my partner, the handy helper, rang my phone, and the ambulance officer answered it and put him on speaker and had a chat with him. And he said, "Is it dislocated?" And the ambulance officer said then, "No, there is a really good chance it's an open fracture. I don't have x-ray vision, but at this stage, it looks like her femur is fractured, which is the your thigh bone." And he said, "We're going to Canberra Hospital. They're the only ones that can deal with this kind of break. So we're going there. You need to meet her in there." Which was fantastic. He was, like I say, I actually went back and visited the Ambos a week after I got out of hospital and took them some chocolates, because I can't thank them enough. They were so good and they looked after me so well. And I know it's their job, but, I also know that they have a pretty lousy job, and like, there's great days and there's shitty days, and I didn't want my day to be a shitty day for them. And I hope it wasn't. I hope it was a day that they felt like they achieved, they did something, because I know as a law enforcement officer, when I have those days, I'm pretty happy with myself when I come home. So we got to Canberra Hospital. Canberra Hospital were amazing. They took one look at the line that the ambo had put in and said, "We don't even need to put a new line in your arm. He's done an amazing job of putting the line in, so we're just going to leave that and we'll use that," even though usually they take the ambulance one out. I didn't know that, but they told me that. They said normally we take the ambulance one out and we put one of our own in. And they did a couple of days later when I had surgery. They put one of their own in. But while I was in accident emergency, they just used the ambo one. And then I had an orthopedics registrar come down and have a look, and he said, "I'm not touching anything until I see an x-ray. Off you go for x-rays." And of course, they had to dope me up again to get me on and off the boards. Well, I think they x-rayed me the first time. They x-rayed me in the actual bed that I was in, so the accident and emergency bed. They x-rayed me in that bed rather than move me, because I was in so much pain. And I will put up for this is on YouTube as well. I will put up a picture, and I'll put it up on social media as well, a picture of the x-ray. It was pretty horrific. I've got to be honest, I've had a few injuries through work. Being law enforcement, you do get injuries. I have only ever broken small bones. I broke a small bone in my hand. I've torn a ligament. I've had my knee surgery, obviously, which was a long-term cartilage injury. I've broken my bone in my nose, my cartilage at the back of my nose. So I've had a couple of little injuries at work, but I've never broken a major bone ever in my life, at work or outside of work. And this is the first time I've had such a serious injury. And I had no clue how bad it was. I just knew that it was bad and that I was in a lot of pain. But I mean, having never broken a major bone, I didn't actually know how much pain a major break would be. So it could have been a small bone and I would have had no clue, having nothing to compare it to. Anyway, when I went down for the x-ray, the radiologist was lovely. She did the x-rays while I was in the bed rather than move me. And then she came out and she said, "Somebody told me that you're a police officer." And I said, "Yeah, that's correct." And she said, "So you won't be grossed out by your x-ray?" And I said, "I'd actually really like to see it, because then I know how bad it is and whether or not this is going to be an easy fix or a long-term thing." And she said, "Oh, it's not going to be an easy fix." But she said, I'll show you the x-ray. And she said, "Have you got your phone with you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do," because the handy helper hadn't arrived at hospital at that point. And I had my phone still with me. And she said, "Give me your phone. I'll take a photo of the x-ray so you can show your partner." And as she was getting the x-ray up on the screen in front of me, she said to me, "Did you pass out? Did you pass out at any point during this injury?" And I said, "No, I've been conscious the whole time." And she said, "I've actually never had somebody with this kind of break who hadn't passed out at some point." She said, "Sometimes when I x-ray them, they're passed out." And I went, "Oh, is it that bad?" Anyway, when she showed me, it was what's referred to as a distal femur fracture, and it was an open fracture. So the bone had broken through the skin, but then luckily enough, it had retracted back under the skin. Now that's good and bad in different ways. It was good that it had retracted back under the skin, but in doing that, because I was in an unhygienic environment, it opened up the threat of infection to my leg. And because I already have a prosthetic knee and now I have a fracture, the threat of infection is significantly increased and can be life-threatening. And not just life-threatening, but people have lost their legs over having infections through open fractures. So, yeah, that changed the the status of how we were dealing with things. But the radiologist was awesome. She took a photo, said, "This is awesome." She was all excited. I said, "I'm glad you're excited. Glad I made somebody's day. I think they just need to give me some more pain relief now." Went back down. By that time, Handy Helper had arrived, and he was there to support me through the rest of the day. And the rest of the day went pretty quick. So I don't think we left Yass until like 10:30. And so it was like 11 o'clock before we were at accident emergency in Canberra. It was probably 12 o'clock before the Handy Helper was in and the x-rays were done. And then between 12 and 4 p.m, I was still in accident emergency. They had to cut the rest of my clothing off. Not my bra. I yelled at the girl and said, "Don't cut my bra if it's my good sports bra. I don't care if you cut everything else off. My undies are old ones. They're farm ones. The t-shirt's an on-farm t-shirt, but don't cut my bra if it's a good bra." And only women will understand that. Once you have a good sports bra, you don't want to let go of it. So obviously I couldn't eat anything, not that I felt like eating anyway. They were keeping the pain relief up to me. They started me on antibiotics straight away because of the open fracture. The surgeon then came down and had a look at the open fracture site and had a bit of a play with that and tried to clean it with some antiseptic and things like that. It kept bleeding. No matter what he did to it, it just kept bleeding. So they ended up just dressing it with padding to try and stop the bleeding. He at one point believed that he could see joint fluid coming out through the wound. So that didn't help the situation. And he then told me that he needed to put me in traction before they moved me up to the ward. And I was going to go and sit in the ward until surgery. And going into traction, if you've not been through it or seen somebody go through it, it's horrific. They have to dope you up, and I'm so glad that he gave me the adequate amount of morphine. So he essentially doped me up on morphine. He got me to hold my partner's hand, Handy Helper. I was hanging onto his hands. I think I nearly broke his fingers. And then the orthopedic surgeon, because of the way the fracture was, my leg had contracted, the muscles had all contracted around the bone. He needed to stretch the leg out to get the muscles to relax prior to surgery so that they could do what they had to do. And so he was very quick about it. And Handy Helper said he wished he'd videoed it because he said he was so quick. He basically held onto the bottom of my ankle and rubbed the back of my calf. And it was almost just like a flick of the wrist, and my leg straightened out. And once my leg straightened out, the pain did subside substantially. He said to me that the muscles contracting around the bone is what causes a lot of the pain. So once you're in traction, your leg is back where it's meant to be. The muscles are back where they're meant to be. The bone's back where it's meant to be. So it's lined up again with the other bone, hopefully. And so once they got me in traction, then they x-rayed again. They also did a CT scan on my knee to check the knee replacement to see whether there was any damage to that. And then they put the weighted traction on the end of my ankle. And once the weighted traction was on, then they moved me up to the ward, where I lay in bed from about 4 o'clock. I got to the ward about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the Saturday until 10 o'clock the next morning. And I wasn't allowed to eat. I was allowed to sip water until midnight, but no food. I wasn't able to get up, move around. I had to lay in exactly the same position. They kept the pain relief up to me. They kept the pain relief up to me overnight. And then in the morning, they forgot to give me pain relief, which after I probably got to about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I rang the buzzer and said, "Look, I'm not kidding. Did you guys forget me on pain relief? Because I'm in agony and you need to give me some pain relief." And she came in and gave me a massive needle of morphine. I'm like, whoa, that worked. I'm not a fan of morphine. Like endone, like the opioids kind of thing, it generally makes my skin itch a bit. So when I've had previous surgeries, I literally only take it while I'm in hospital and then I stop taking it. But man, I couldn't have survived without the morphine they gave me at the hospital. Anyway, 10 o'clock Sunday morning, the surgeon came in all excited. "We are ready for you. We're going to take you into surgery." The big boss has come in because he wants to have a look at what we're going to do around your knee replacement. Which was awesome to know that so many doctors were so concerned about making sure they got it right. I cannot speak highly enough for the surgeons that operated on my leg. So 10 o'clock Sunday morning, they took me in. They inserted, I think it's called an intermediary rod into my femur. So it goes in through a little incision up near my the top of my thigh near my hip. And the rod is a 12 mil rod, and it goes down through my femur and all the way through into my knee, and is bolted both at the top and at the bottom. And it aligns the broken part of the femur at the bottom. And because mine was a distal fracture, it was only like an inch off the knee. So it brings the break at the knee point back in line with the main part of the femur bone. And they bolted everything together. They also had to debride the wound site where the bone had come out because, like I said, it becomes a real issue as far as infection. And I didn't know. I've seen lots of open fractures in my work as a police officer, but I've never had one myself, and nobody close to me has had one themselves. So I didn't know what the story was with that. But they debride the wound site and open it up a lot wider, clean all the skin around it. They want to make sure that there is no chance of any kind of infection getting into the bone. My sister-in-law, handy helper sister, is a nurse, and she did explain to me that it's to do with bone infections. I think it's called osteomyelitis or osteosepsis or something like that. And if you get an infection into the bone, you can lose your leg. So obviously that's the worst kind of outcome. So loading me up on antibiotics, which was no fun. I had lots of vomits in hospital. Every time they gave me antibiotics, I would vomit until they started giving me anti-nausea shots before they'd give me the antibiotic shot. But they cleaned all the wound site. I ended up with 21 staples in total in my leg where they had entered to do the rod surgery, but also where they'd had to patch up the hole in my knee. And the hole in my knee didn't look that big to start with, but evidently when they debride it, they have to cut a lot of skin around around the edge of that open wound site. So it made the hole a bit bigger. And so I woke up at about 12 o'clock in recovery, and he'd said to me, they hummed and hard about putting a plate in on my femur or putting a rod in. And he said, if we put a plate in, you'll have a big open wound down the outside of your thigh. He said, but a plate's not our preference. We'd rather put a rod in. It heals better. It can stay in there. It doesn't come out. It stays forever. Unless I have to have hip surgery, then it may have to come out. But if granted that I never have a hip problem, the rod will stay in until I die. He said, when you wake up, you'll either feel a small incision up the top of your thigh or a large incision down the side of your thigh. And that will tell you what we did. He said, but I'll come and see you in the afternoon anyway. So when I woke up, I felt straight away, and there was a small incision on the top of my thigh. And I thought, you beauty, they were able to do the rod. That's the best outcome according to him. So, excellent. So by the time I got back to my room, handy helper had come in to visit me. He'd been at home on the farm getting things organised. And we were very excited that they were able to repair it using a rod instead of a plate. The handy helper has a plate in his leg from an old surgery that he had to have, and it aches sometimes, and you can actually feel the metal. It's not a very nice feeling. So having the rod internally, I think, was much better than having a plate that you can feel on the outside of your bone. Anyway, so that was the 2nd of November, the surgery. 3rd of November, I woke up and the physio came in and said, we're getting you out of bed to walk in a walker today. I could not believe it. Broken femur 2 days ago, badly broken femur 2 days ago, and they had me up walking day 3, which was awesome because I wanted to get up and have a shower and go to the bathroom and do all the things, and I was starving hungry by that point because I hadn't eaten for 2 days. So, yeah, it was insane. But the hospital staff were amazing. I stayed until the 6th of November, so I was in hospital for 6 days in total. And then I begged them to let me go home. The physio wouldn't let me go home until I could walk on crutches and lift my leg up to get up a step, but I was able to do that by the 6th day. So I went home with the handy helper and literally spent 2 weeks on bed rest. So I was getting up, doing my exercises they'd given me. I'd go to the bathroom, all on crutches. I'd go in for appointments to the doctor, go into the appointments for the physio, and then come straight back home, ice pack it, put my leg up in the air. Like, we've got to adjust a bed, so I have my leg up higher than my heart to try and get the swelling down. That first 2 weeks at home, so the weeks 2 and 3, I have never experienced pain like it. I dropped the endone because I don't like taking the opioid pain medication. So I was just on Panadol, and those first 2 weeks were hell. There was a couple of times where I was like, maybe I should just take an endone and get a good night's sleep. And I think I did at one point. I took 2 endone and had a good night's sleep, and then went, no, my skin's crawling again, so I'm back to Panadol. It is now, we are week 6.5 since the injury, and I'm still not able to weight bear 100% on that leg. But yesterday I finally was able to enter the pool again. I wasn't allowed to go back in the pool because of the open wound site. I had to wait till that was completely healed, so that we didn't have an infection. But I did exercises in a hydrotherapy pool yesterday, which was amazing. It was so nice to be back in the water and have that weightlessness after being on crutches for 6 weeks. And I've still got another 6 weeks of crutches to go. So I'm not off crutches till the end of January. And then I'll probably still be with a walking stick or at least one crutch for some time after that. At my age, it's likely going to take between 12 weeks and 24 weeks before it's completely healed. So I'll be going back into the fracture clinic to have x-rays to see if the bone is healing. I went back in. I did have a little bit of a hiccup where I had some pain in my lower calf and they were worried about blood clots. And so I had to go back in and have some scans done to make sure that I didn't have any blood clots, because they obviously can be quite deadly, deep vein thrombosis. And through that whole 6 weeks up until yesterday, I have been having to inject myself with blood thinners, which I'll put a little clip on the YouTube video as well. It was my most hated part of the whole process, even with the pain and everything else. Injecting myself, I take my hat off to diabetics. Honestly, it drove me insane having to inject myself. And the handy helper offered to do it, and I was like, no, I'll do it. Anyway, you get covered in bruises all around your stomach where you have to inject these blood thinners, and I had 6.5 weeks of blood thinners. I've just finished yesterday, my last injection. Thank God I don't have to do it tonight. It's such a weight off my shoulders. But even with the blood thinners, you can still get a blood clot from such a big break like this. So now it's just physio, building up the strength in my leg. I am back on my carnivore diet, trying to really up those proteins and make sure that I'm getting adequate nutrients. I've also started taking collagen supplements. I've had to take live culture supplements for my stomach because I was on antibiotics for so long that my stomach is absolutely destroyed. The worst bit is the farm still goes on, and I've still had to do things around the farm even with being on bed rest. So within a week, probably 10 days of being the accident, so around the 10th of November, I was back to milking the goats again. And it was complicated, and we managed it. And sometimes you just have to do the best you can. So we had the kids helping to get Poppy in for milking. Poppy was the only one I was milking at that point, and to get her up onto the milking bale. And then I would sit on a milk crate next to the milking bale. I would quickly milk, and then I would literally put the lid on the milking bale, hand it to TJ. She would take it and run with it into the kitchen, and I would just get up on my crutches and go, and OJ and handy helper would sort out the animals, and I would just literally walk out of the yard because it was too big a risk of me being knocked over. So I would go, I would do these guesty milking sessions where I'd just sit down, milk the goat, get up, walk away, and leave everybody else to clean up the mess. But the kids were amazing for the first 2 weeks while I was really, really incapacitated. They helped me so much. Obviously, in the last 2 weeks, I've been much more capable. I'm at home today on my own. Maybe I have a trolley over here it's a trolley that I wheel around. My crutches in the background. I've got a trolley there that I put things on, and it's on wheels. My crutches just are in the background there. I've got everything sorted so that it's easy for me to make myself a cup of tea. And I'm using things like containers that have lids on them so that I can carry them, stick them in my pocket with my crutches, and then I can sit down and drink them or whatever. You just have to adjust things to how you can manage. And like I say, at 6.5 weeks, we're doing a lot better. I can walk with just one crutch. I'm not supposed to. The doctor doesn't really want me doing that. But there are times when I've just had to kind of move from point A to point B with something quickly. And obviously, if I do any damage, that's on me, and I'll have to wear that. But the chooks, the kids have looked after. The milky goats, we've since I had my accident, we had Lucy kidded without telling me. She's the master of surprise kiddings. She has no signs at all that she's going to kid. She just suddenly drops them in the middle of nowhere. And it was a massive thunderstorm. Handy helper and I were sitting inside. We've got a lounge chair that the legs, it's got a recliner bit. He'd put the recliner up. I was watching some TV just to give myself something to do. We'd been out and checked the animals that morning because I am allowed to walk on the crutches some distance. And then we had a massive thunderstorm, and I said, I should go check Lucy because she's due. And we had her in a separate yard because she was due. And he walked around the corner. Before I could get there, I heard him say, oh, my God, she's already done it. And she had twin girls called Ivy and Clover. Both white, take after their dad in that respect, but very much take after their mum in every other respect, who will be milky goats for us. So it was lovely to get twin girls. And so she's now being milked as well. And we're managing. We're managing to get everything done. Anyway, I've probably gone over time there, but I just want to say hi to everybody, let you all know that the podcast will be continuing. I have just given myself the grace of having 4 weeks of doing nothing to allow my leg to heal, which I think was really important. And it's a huge step for me because normally I would try and push through and keep doing shit. And I think the pain of this was so intense that it kind of sat me on my ass, and I really had no choice but to sit, rest, and allow the bone to heal. The bone is healing now. Like I say, I'm doing hydrotherapy, physiotherapy in the pool, which was awesome yesterday. It actually felt really good after I got out of the pool. And so it's game on. We're back to normal scheduling, hopefully. I've got a couple of days here where I'm going to hopefully record a few so that it covers me through to January. I go back to my normal day job. Thank God I have a normal day job because they've been paying the bills still. I go back to my normal day job on the 2nd of January. And they have been kind enough to move me to a different office where it's much easier for me to get in and out of, and easier to get to a desk instead of having to go up lifts and stairs and all that kind of crap. And I'll sit there for a couple of months until my leg is completely healed, which is lovely. It's good to have a job like that. Because I'm not operational, obviously, at the moment. I'm not out fighting crime and winning. But yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. The podcast is back to normal scheduling. This one will come out a bit earlier. I'll probably release this in the next day or two. Excuse me. But then we'll be back to our normal scheduling. Thank you, everybody, for being patient, and hopefully it will be game on again. And other than that, bye for now. Have a great Christmas. The next one after this one will be a Christmas episode. Have a fantastic Christmas. If you're in Australia, in southern Australia like us, or northern Australia, I think are copping it as well, you would be smack in the middle of a heat wave at the moment. If you're one of my friends from over in the States, rug up. I hear that it's just a little chilly over there at the moment. Stay warm. Have a great Christmas, and the next episode should drop Christmas Day. So that'll give you something to listen to where you're sipping on a cold one or a warm hot chocolate or warm hot toddy maybe. Anyway, bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.